guys, glad to see everybody. Today is Wednesday. As you can see, we're back outside. I heard some positive feedback from the last video. Everybody said, hey, it looks nice you being outside, and it sounded pretty good, so we're going to give it a try again. It's a little bit windy today, so hopefully there's not a gust of wind that comes through and creates a lot of noise. But anyway, before we get into the lesson, I want to make sure I follow up from where we ended last time. If you remember the last video, we were out, I was out fishing, and we talked about being fishers of men. And I said, hey, if you have a picture of you catching a fish or if you fishing, send it along. That way we can highlight it on the video for today. Well, a couple new things since last week. I have a new assistant that's helping me input the pictures in the middle of the video. So we're going to try that feature out to see how it goes. But I got two pictures from viewers this week. One of them came from Will Hobble. He caught a nice fish, by the way. And the other came from Mr. Jason. Now I have to say, Mr. Jason's fish wins. So we're going to wait till the end of the video and let you see Mr. Jason's fish. But at the snap of my fingers, we're going to show Will's fish. So Will, nice fish, man. That's a nice bass you caught there. Apparently Mr. Jason said he had one on that was 3 times that big, but I didn't get a picture, and my rule is if you can't kiss it, you didn't catch it. So anyway, the other thing I noticed with Will's picture, if you notice his hat, did you notice the brim? Good job, Will. They caught that yesterday. And let me get this right. Mr. Jason said they didn't use the green wiggly worm with the pink head. They used a 4-inch blue watermelon lizard. So good job. Test that bait out sometime. But you know, I was talking to Mr. Jason, and we've started to highlight some of the different people that are missing all the kids, and he misses seeing you too. Did you know that Mr. Jason is also an artist? He showed me a picture that he drew of a fish, and we'll insert that right here. Not bad. Now the only problem is, to me, it looks like a rainbow trout. But Mr. Jason said he was trying to draw a marlin. But either way, it still looks pretty good. And with him being an artist like that, I think his name shouldn't be Mr. Jason anymore. It should be Mr. Jason, because he's very like a French artist drawing that picture. So anyway, again, like I said, wait till the very end of the video, because we have the prize catch of Mr. Jason that we're going to show at the very end. So let's go ahead and get into the lesson for today. Today, we're going to be in the book of Mark chapter 2, and the story is going to be the one, it's a miracle that Jesus performs where he heals a leper. So again, it's Mark chapter 2, and we're going to look at verses 40 through 45. So here we go. Again, Jesus cleanses a leper. And a leper came to him, imploring him, and kneeling said to him, if you will, can you make me clean? Moved with pity, he stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, I will, be clean. And immediately the leprosy left him, and he was made clean. And Jesus sternly charged him and sent him away at once and said to him, see that you say nothing to anyone, but go show yourself to the priest and offer for your cleansing what Moses commanded for a proof to them. But he went out and began to talk freely about it, and to spread the news so that Jesus could no longer openly enter a town, but was out in desolate places. And people were coming to him from every quarter. So let me summarize this story for you. So what we have here is Jesus is actually out and about, and if you look back at some of the verses before this, he's out teaching people, and he's performed a lot of miracles. So this leper has heard about the fact that Jesus is a miracle worker, and they heal people, and he has healed people. So he came, and in the beginning of the passage, he asked Jesus if he would be willing to heal him. And Jesus says, yes, I will. He says, be clean. And the leprosy was gone. Now, let me give you a quick understanding. I know many of you probably know what leprosy is, but some of you may not. But leprosy was a disease that was pretty common during biblical times. It was a skin disease, and it would cause people to get rashes and sores that broke out over their body. And it was believed to be extremely contagious. And they actually had a process in the Bible that mentioned how lepers were supposed to be dealt with. And we can find that in the book of Leviticus. In Leviticus, it's actually recorded God gave instructions to the Jewish people and to the priest on how they handle someone who has leprosy. So I'm not going to read all of the different rules and regulations, but if you want to look at this with your parents, it's Leviticus chapter 13 and 14 that address the procedures for someone who has leprosy. And so essentially I'll summarize it for you, but if someone had this disease, they would go to the priest would look at them, they would evaluate them, and there was a ton of different rules about how the priest would classify the type of leprosy. And if the priest deemed or said, yes, you have leprosy, that person would be considered unclean. And then depending on the situation, the priest would actually put that person in a quarantine or send them away where they have to be away from other people. Some of the cases was for 7 days, some cases were for more. And then when the person thought that they had been healed of leprosy, or if they thought it got better, they would have to go back to the priest. The priest would have to look at the person again and determine whether or not the leprosy was considered healed. And if the priest said yes, then that person would be considered clean, and then he or she could go back in and mix around with the people. And it's very interesting because what I just explained sounds pretty similar to what we're currently going through right now with coronavirus. I know some of you are paying attention to this more than others, but we're currently in a time where this virus, the coronavirus, is going around, and if you have it, you're being told to quarantine. You're being told that you need to go away for at least 14 days and not be around other people. We're also told that if you think you might have it, don't go around people. And you may have it but not know about it, so as a precaution, wear a mask. So it's interesting that this coronavirus, as many of you know, this is not the first time in history that people have had to quarantine. Sickness is something that's been around since sin entered the world. So I just wanted to kind of show the parallel of this story of the leper compared to what we're dealing with today. And while it's a pain, it's a normal part of life. It's something that we have to deal with because of sin. So let's take a look at what else the story has to say. So the next, after Jesus heals this man and now he's clean, Jesus says sternly, and I want to make sure you understand, sternly, which means seriously. He tells this person not to say anything about it, but to go straight to the priest and so that he could be considered cleansed. So like we talked about what it shows in Leviticus, Jesus says to the gentleman or the person, go to the priest, show him that your leprosy is gone. And the reason Jesus did that is because the priest would have to deem the person clean. That was just the way that their society practiced the shift or the transition from being unclean to clean. The priest had to give the good word on that, and that was the instruction that God gave them all the way back in Leviticus. But what did the man do? Did he stay quiet? He didn't. It says he went out and began to talk freely about it. Now, I always thought about why in the world would Jesus tell the person not to tell anybody about what happened? I mean, if you came up with a cure, or let's say you had the coronavirus, and someone came to you and say, hey, I've got this cure, take this pill, or let me wipe this special, cream or something on you, and all of a sudden the coronavirus was gone, you'd be telling everybody. I'd be telling everybody, and that's just our nature. But I think God had a reason for why he specifically told the person not to go tell anybody. And it gives us a clue at the end of this passage. It says, and after the person talked freely about it, Jesus could no longer openly enter a town, but was out in desolate places, and people were coming to him from every quarter. So we don't know the exact reason why Jesus told this person not to tell everybody, but it seems to make evidence here that the reason Jesus didn't want him to say anything was because, for whatever reason, whatever the situation Christ was in at that given time, he couldn't have all these other people flocking to him. And I think if you had to make a guess, or you had to figure out why, you look at up to this point in the story, Jesus had been healing a lot of people, and a lot of people had seen miracles, and the word was spreading very, very quickly. And you probably had a case where these people were coming to Jesus only so that they could be healed. But we know in looking at Scripture that Christ really wants us to come to him to have a relationship with him, a deep relationship, versus just a surface relationship of, hey, he healed my sickness, and now I'm going to move on to the next thing. So Jesus wanted to make sure that he was able to be serious and in-depth with his ministry. And as a result of all the people, he had to get out of town where he could be away from everybody, because it was drawing too much attention. And the attention he was drawing, he was not ready for that because of the timing that God had laid out. It just wasn't the time for that. So I think it's very important to not overlook the fact that Jesus sternly told him to not come to him, and what happened when all the people came around. The last point I want to make is about Jesus touching the leper. And in verse 41 it says, he stretched out his hand and touched him. Now, I want to make sure that we don't overlook this, because in Leviticus chapter 5, the law tells people how to handle unclean things. And one of the things that's considered unclean, among many other things, is someone who has leprosy. So in Leviticus, it says that if you touch something that is unclean, you are unclean. So for example, let's just say that this leaf is something that's unclean. By me touching it, again, just an example, I am now unclean. So you might wonder, well, then why did Jesus touch this person? Well, it's very important to point out that Jesus, who is fully man and fully God, is unable to be unclean. So Jesus is the only person that can make us clean. By nature, we are unclean. We are sinful. But if we reach out our hand to him, he will make us clean. So Jesus, being God, is above the law, and that is how he is able to demonstrate that he can reach out to this unclean thing, unclean person, touch him, and make him clean. So I hope that I was able to clearly communicate the story. I've been praying that God would allow my words to make sense to you as I went through this story. Next week, we're going to look at the next story in Mark, which is about Jesus healing someone who was paralyzed. I also have been asked by popular demand. Last time I said something about Mr. Lou and Miss Dottie being in the Kids at Heart age bracket. So I actually have age bracket definitions, and I was asked to share that. So look forward to that next week. I'm going to break it all down for you, each age bracket, what it's called, and what it means. And before we go, lastly but not least, I know the moment you've all been waiting for, Mr. Jason's fish.